The sky had been a sullen, leaden gray all day, but nothing in Daniel's years on the streets had prepared him for the sudden fury that erupted as dusk fell. He and Rusty, his faithful mixed-breed companion, had just settled beneath the cracked concrete archway of a highway overpass, its sheltering curve a small respite from the wind. Daniel spread a thin foam pad on the damp ground and wrapped his tattered pea coat around Rusty as the first snowflakes drifted lazily from the heavens. Rusty pressed his muzzle into Daniel's side, ears flattened, trusting the warmth of the man who never left his side. Within minutes the flakes turned to whipping flurries, driven by a gale that shrieked through the girders overhead. The wind tore at Daniel's coat and stung his cheeks like slivers of ice, but he folded his body around Rusty, shielding the dog's lean frame from the worst of the blast. Each breath was a painful gasp as snow found its way beneath their collars and settled in clinging wisps on Rusty's fur. Daniel's own hair stuck in frost-laced clumps at his forehead, and he could feel the early burn of cold deep in his bones, yet he dared not move, knowing that any attempt to find a better spot could expose them to the merciless wind. Traffic above thinned to a lull as the blizzard gained strength, the headlights of passing trucks and cars blurring into smeared ribbons of gold through the swirling white. Daniel pressed his face to Rusty's side, speaking in low, steady tones. "It's coming on worse than last year, buddy. Stay close." Rusty whimpered once but nestled tighter, his body heat a lifeline against the encroaching chill. The rumble of the overpass above offered a strange comfort, its steady drone reminding Daniel that somewhere beyond the storm, the world still turned. As darkness deepened and the temperature plunged, the overpass became both sanctuary and prison. Icicles formed along the edges of the concrete, dripping cold beads that splashed onto Daniel's hands whenever he reached out to soothe Rusty. He counted the seconds between the gusts, each powerful whoosh flinging more snow into their refuge. With every roar, he felt the hollow ache of hunger and weariness deepen, but more than anything, he felt the unbreakable bond to the dog at his side. Together, under that storm-tossed sky, Daniel and Rusty braced themselves against the blizzard's roaring onslaught, two souls united by necessity, courage, and the unspoken promise that they would weather this night together. Before first light, the blizzard showed no mercy. Snow swirled in chaotic eddies, blanketing the city in a blinding white curtain. Daniel hoisted Rusty into his arms, wrapping the dog's legs around his torso to keep the frostbite at bay. The gale-force wind lashed at their faces, turning every breath into a gasp of pain. He pulled his collar up over his nose, eyes squinting against the whipping snow, and set off through the waist-deep drifts that swallowed his boots with every step. Each footfall was a battle. The snow's soft surface would collapse beneath him, sending him plunging thigh-deep into the cold. Daniel wrenched himself free and trudged on, his legs trembling from the effort and the cold seeping into his knees. He leaned into the wind, using each powerful gust as a strange kind of push forward, though it threatened to knock him off balance at the same time. Rusty's paws thudded against Daniel's chest, rigid with cold, and the dog whimpered softly, its small body tensing in alarm as a sudden gust nearly tore Rusty from Daniel's protective hold. Visibility was reduced to mere feet. Streetlights flickered like dying embers in the white haze, and familiar landmarks vanished behind walls of snow. Frozen slush coated Daniel's jeans, then hardened into a brittle shell that crackled with each movement. He felt the city's pulse fade beneath the storm, distant sirens muffled by the wind, engines stalled in drifts, and the echo of metal grates unclenched by frost. In that silent, swirling void, Daniel and Rusty were the only living beings for blocks. Daniel's throat burned as he shouted Rusty's name, though the sound was immediately swallowed by the roar of the blizzard. He forced himself onward, guided only by instinct and the faint glow of what he hoped was a familiar intersection. Every few paces, he paused to catch his breath, pressing Rusty's paws against his chest to restore warmth and murmuring, "Almost there, just a bit further, buddy." Hours seemed to pass in this frozen march. The world had contracted to the two of them and the storm's relentless fury. With each staggering step, Daniel's resolve hardened. He would not leave Rusty to fend alone, nor would he give in to the storm's cruelty. At last,
When his vision blurred and his body trembled with exhaustion, he spotted the dim outline of an emergency station, its front doors illuminated by a weak, welcoming light.
Summoning every last ounce of strength, Daniel staggered forward, Rusty's nails clicking against the sidewalk as Daniel set him down. The dog shook, snow flying from his fur, then pressed against Daniel's legs in gratitude. Together, they crossed the threshold into warmth and safety. Behind them, the whiteout raged on, but inside those doors, Daniel and Rusty found the shelter and care they so desperately needed, proof that even the fiercest storm could not extinguish hope. By the time the first pale fingers of dawn crept through the swirling gray, the blizzard's roar had softened to an uneasy whisper. Daniel blinked against the soft light filtering through the overpass girders, shivering as he stirred Rusty from his restless sleep. The puppy, no longer a puppy, really, but a lean, weathered dog whose loyalty had kept them alive, stood unsteadily, lifting one paw and setting it down gingerly. "Easy, buddy," Daniel murmured, voice thick with concern. He knelt in the slushy residue of last night's snowdrifts and inspected Rusty's paws by the faint glow of the awakening sky. Where the pads should have been supple and dark, they were pale, cracked, and stiff, tiny fractures running through the flesh like frostbitten glass. A thin film of frozen blood glazed the webbing between Rusty's toes. A lump formed in Daniel's throat. He knew frostbite as well as hunger, a silent thief of limbs if left to its own devices. Without hesitation, Daniel stripped off his own gloves and pressed Rusty's paws against his bare palms, willing every ounce of his body heat into the chilled flesh. Rusty whimpered, tail lowering, and Daniel whispered encouragements, "I've got you. Stay with me." He tore a strip of the sleeve from his tattered coat, twisting it into a makeshift bandage around the most damaged paw. Then he dug higher into his jacket and produced a faded plastic bag, once holding scavenged bread, and fashioned it into a crude paw boot, tying it gently with frayed shoelaces he kept for just such emergencies. With two paws protected, Rusty managed a few wobbly steps. Daniel coaxed him forward, all the while humming softly to mask the urgency in his own chest. The storm had passed, but the temperature hovered just above freezing, each second risked more damage. Daniel risked a glance toward the distant skyline, where he knew a small emergency warming center stood on the far side of the park. It was a good mile away, and Rusty's strides had slowed to a painful crawl. Daniel scooped Rusty into his arms, carrying him like a child against the biting wind. The weight felt impossibly light and desperately heavy all at once, light because of Rusty's frail body, heavy because every ounce reminded Daniel of how close they'd come to losing him. He wrapped both of them in the remaining half of his wool scarf and pressed on, each step an act of will against the numb ache in his own legs. As the sun peeked over the rooftops, painting the snowfields gold, Daniel sighted the warming center's lantern door. His heart soared with relief. With Rusty held tight, he moved faster, careful not to jostle the injured paws, knowing that every heartbeat they beat together was a triumph over the night's cruelty. In that moment, dawn was more than daylight. It was the fragile line they'd crossed from survival towards salvation. The warming center's double doors swung open with a soft whoosh, letting in a swirl of cold air that carried the faint scent of snow and distant exhaust. Inside, the room was alive with low conversation, the hiss of a space heater, and the comforting aroma of hot cocoa. Rows of folding chairs faced a chipped linoleum floor, and a long table in the corner bore mugs of steaming beverages and stacks of thick fleece blankets. Daniel carried Rusty in his arms, the dog's patched-up paws wincing whenever they brushed against the cool air, and scanned the space with cautious hope. As Daniel edged toward the table, a kind-faced social worker in a bright teal parka appeared beside him. "You two look like you could use something warm," she said, her voice gentle but certain. She offered Daniel a steaming mug of cocoa, the rich aroma of chocolate rising in soft curls. With her free hand, she draped a heavy wool blanket over Daniel's shoulders and tucked its edge around Rusty's shivering frame. Daniel's fingers closed reflexively on the blanket's edge, warmth flooding through him for the first time since the storm began. The social worker introduced herself as Carla and knelt to Rusty's level. "Let's check those paws," she murmured, her tone all kindness and calm authority. Using a pair of latex gloves and a small flashlight, she examined Rusty's toes, praising the little boot Daniel had fashioned and gently removing it to inspect the healing frostbite. Rusty whimpered once, then relaxed as Carla spoke soothingly. She applied a gentle warming gel to his pads and wrapped new, cushioned booties around each foot, ensuring no further damage. While Rusty rested beneath the wool blanket, Carla guided Daniel to a small table where she filled out a referral form. "We have a volunteer vet on site tomorrow," she explained, sliding the paperwork across. "They'll see Rusty first thing, no questions asked."
Daniel's heart raced as he took the pen.
He hadn't expected anyone to care this much or to trust him enough to offer genuine help. As he signed his name, he felt a cautious thread of optimism weaving through his exhaustion. Near the door, a volunteer ladled bowls of thick vegetable soup and offered them with warm smiles. Daniel carried the bowl back to a plastic chair beside a roaring heater. He spooned the steaming liquid slowly, feeling its warmth spread through his chest, and beside him, Rusty lapped gently at a small dish of broth. The room's chatter, once distant and impersonal, now felt inclusive, a chorus of shared stories, laughter, and support. When at last Daniel and Rusty rose to leave, Carla wrapped Daniel in one more blanket and handed him a voucher for a free night at a pet-friendly shelter. "You've done everything right," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Tomorrow, things will look brighter." Outside, the storm had stilled, leaving glittering snowdrifts under the street lamps. Daniel paused on the threshold, Rusty nestled in his arms against the final chill. In that moment, Carla's kindness shone like a beacon of proof that compassion could pierce even the fiercest blizzard, guiding them toward hope and a warmer tomorrow. By mid-morning the blizzard had fully lifted, leaving the city streets glazed with ice and drifts of glittering snow. Wrapped in the extra blanket Carla had given them, Daniel and Rusty stepped out of the warming center and followed her down the quiet avenue to the pet-friendly shelter she'd arranged. The building's warm light shone like a beacon against the pale winter sky, and a small wind chime at the entrance tinkled softly as they passed through the door. Inside, the shelter was a flurry of activity. Volunteers carried trays of hot oatmeal and fresh fruit, while a few residents sipped coffee around low tables stacked with newspapers and board games. The air smelled of pine-scented cleaner and fresh laundry. A kindly receptionist greeted Daniel by name, took Rusty's leash gently in her hand, and led them to a private room down a bright corridor. The room was small but cozy, a soft twin bed with a thick duvet, a brightly painted chest of drawers, and a well-padded dog bed by the radiator. Daniel eased Rusty down onto the cushion and knelt beside him. Rusty stretched his legs gingerly, testing each paw before giving Daniel an approving wag of his tail. Across the hall, a volunteer vet arrived to check Rusty's healing pads, praising the makeshift boot and replacing it with a snug, insulated paw wrap. With each careful adjustment, Rusty's eyes brightened, and Daniel felt relief wash through him. His companion was going to be okay. After settling Rusty, Daniel joined a small orientation group in the common room. A shelter coordinator handed him a schedule: 3 hot meals a day, access to laundry facilities, counseling services, and a weekly job skills workshop. There was also a notice board advertising a part-time cleaning position at a nearby community center and the chance to sign up for a local housing lottery that accepted pets. Daniel's heart thumped with cautious excitement. For the first time in months he could plan beyond the next hour. Later that afternoon, Rusty and Daniel ventured into the shelter's small courtyard and enclosed patio with benches and a few hardy shrubs peeking through the snow. Rusty romped in the cleared path, chasing tossed cotton balls from a volunteer, while Daniel sipped a cup of hot tea. As he watched Rusty bark joyfully, something inside him shifted. The overwhelming isolation of the streets was replaced by a sense of belonging. That evening, Daniel lay in the soft shelter bed, the quiet hum of the heating system a gentle lullaby. Rusty curled up at his feet, his chest rising and falling in relaxed rhythm. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, Daniel traced the scars on Rusty's paws and whispered, "We did it, pal. We made it through." Outside, snowflakes drifted silently against the windowpane, But inside, two lives once battered by the storm now rested in warmth and safety. As sleep claimed him, Daniel dreamed not of wind-whipped nights or frozen concrete, but of a shared future filled with simple joys, morning walks in thawing parks, hot meals in cozy kitchens, and a home they could call their own. And beside him, Rusty's soft snore affirmed that hope, once a distant glimmer, was now a steady, comforting presence in their lives, proof that together, and with the kindness of strangers, they had found refuge and the promise of brighter days to come.